bowled over in a bed in like my room, just in a ball, sobbing. The only thing that brought me some relief was sitting in a bathtub because my whole body just felt like it was decaying from the inside out. We need you to come in immediately tomorrow. She said, well, we usually like to deliver this news in person, but you do have cancer.
Hey, welcome to Humble the Poet Daily-ish with your host, myself, Humble the Poet. I'm really excited to share this episode with you. Today I'm talking to Taryn Southern. For those who don't know, Taryn Southern is an artist. She's originally from Kansas. She was on American Idol when she was 17. She has a film, a beautiful film that premiered at Tribeca in 2019 called I Am Human, and it explores the future of the brain. It has to do with just the really cool journey of people putting computers in their brain, whether it's people to try to regain their eyesight, try to get limbs moving, deal with Parkinson's. Is super dope. She's award-winning Google VR series, and she has an Ethereum-enabled song token for those hype on crypto. From biotech to blockchain, her work has been featured on Vanity Fair, Fast Company, Wired, TechCrunch, Business Insider, Forbes, and more. But beyond her resume, she is just a beautiful, sweet person. I think the first time I met her, she was just super kind and sweet to me, and not me having no idea what she did. And she's gone through some shit. She's definitely gone through shit. She's a cancer thriver, in addition to a whole bunch of other things. And we have a great conversation. I'm excited for you guys to hear it. So without further ado, let's get into it. Thank you so much for being here.
So good to be with you.
I am super jealous that you are in lovely, lovely Bali right now.
It's pretty weird that I'm halfway across the world and we're here on Zoom and the internet's pretty good.
It is pretty good. I literally just changed out of my snow pants.
I was sweating my balls off outside just 2 seconds ago because it is humid in Bali.
Oh man, I can imagine. I don't remember how we know each other. I feel like my earliest memory of you was that I feel like I saw you at the YouTube space, but even then,
Yeah.
I was already following you.
I think you were with
yes,
when I met you.
yeah, but I remember you had like figured out. What did you figure out? Oh, you figured out like how to hack like clickable links on YouTube to like go to like a certain site.
Yes, and you were like, "How did you do that? How did you
Yes.
get to go to a whatever site you wanted?" I remember that.
And you showed me like it was like a very clever hack at that point. And I feel like that's literally like the theme of everything you do. And I mean, it's crazy if we kind of go through our hangouts and histories. It's like we've hung out in Toronto, we've hung out in New York, we've hung out in Arizona, maybe we've hung out in LA. I'm sure we have. Just and every time you're always doing something super cool, um, where you're just kind of you're blurring the lines between like technology and biology and the brain and the soul and everything else in between.
Thank you.
Why is all that stuff so interesting to you?
Oh man, I mean, I love spaces where there are no rules. It's probably why I was attracted to doing YouTube because it was just such a wide open frontier, and I feel like having now left the YouTube world, I just get really excited about things that aren't quite yet gelled, like that haven't quite matriculated, because it's like it's still finding its place, and I almost feel like a detective sort of navigating a new space, and it's like getting a glimpse into the future. It's just so exciting, and then figuring out how these tools or new ideas can actually change the course of humanity or change just even our personal lives and making them better is extremely interesting to me. I mean, we're all just on a path to trying to, be better and improve our lives. So I get really excited about what I perceive to be like breakthrough ideas.
It's interesting you say like we're on this path to be better. I feel like a lot of people are on a path to feel better, and even when the opportunity to be better, like eat more broccoli is presented, we pass up on it. Have you found that sometimes this journey of being better doesn't necessarily make you feel better?
That's a great point. I mean, absolutely. I think sometimes the quest to always striving to be better is an endless one, and it can feel hollow.
Mm.
Um, and I know from many of your writings how eloquently you actually talk about these very topics, and just sitting with what is, and sort of acceptance. And um, yeah, I think that's a really good point. How would you respond to that?
Um, I think what I've been learning a lot now is this idea of like, what helped you survive one thing can hold you back in another thing, and especially in phases. So I think about like all the subconscious tools I had growing up in the neighborhood I grew up in, growing up in the culture I grew up in, kind of navigating the entertainment industry, all very, aggressive, uh, wild, wild west kind of spaces. And then realizing how much those could hurt me in my interpersonal skills, how much those can hurt me in my communication abilities, um, how much those can hurt me in spaces where people are extra sensitive or cognitive about how you speak to them. So I think that's been a big thing I've been really kind of focusing on. Is like, all right, what helped me here, or what helped me get through high school isn't going to help me get through this business meeting or what have you. And then the other way, something I considered a wound could exactly be my medicine now. um,
Wow,
and I'm really trying to figure all of that out.
that's poignant, and uh, and what a beautiful insight. And it's so true. We all sort of use the best tools that we have at the time to navigate a situation. And at some point, a lot of times those tools no longer serve us or just become a glass ceiling. And wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, it was a liberating revelation, and now it's just a lot of work of like digging through, because you got to go back a lot now, and you start to see like there's some shit back there. And it's also kind of like this idea of, I think we all enjoy levels of freedom, and then when you start digging inside, realizing how much you hold yourself back, you're like, oh shit, like all these walls and fences like were made by me. It's a whole different journey versus, trying to free yourself from like the expectations of your parents or the expectations of society or your culture or your boss. Now all of a sudden you're looking yourself in the mirror and you're just like, oh shit, like how do I punch this person in the face and, deal with that?
I remember us talking in Canada. This was now crazy that it was 2 years ago because it feels like it was yesterday. And we were talking about expectations around family expectations around where we should be at this point in our lives. And had I had, I mean, I remember we had a really sort of deep conversation around this and expressing some of the fears that we have to regularly work on suppressing or overcoming or, reprogramming ourselves around. And had I had any clue what was about to be thrown at me in the year following that dinner with you, it's like I remember thinking in that moment, wow, I've come so far. Like I really am so much better at navigating life. And then life just hands you all sorts of new shit.
Well, I mean, since you brought it up,
Over.
I mean, and I want to hear that, and I think, yeah, I completely agree with you on that, and I mean, since you did bring up the fact that, yeah, I saw you 2 years ago, you were here working on a film, a really interesting film, and um, you know,
Which you do in New York, which was awesome.
which by itself was just, going to Tribeca was a bucket list item for me. To be able to go to Tribeca and watch one of my friends' films was just, it was amazing. And to like be, just I remember specifically being in like the third grade, and like, your teacher shows you a film, and then like we would clap at the end, and our teacher would berate us. She was like, why are you clapping? They can't hear you. And I remember I had that moment where at the end of that film I'm clapping, I'm like, they can hear me and I will clap for this film.
Yay.
And that's exactly what it is. And just, to see the panel and all of that, I thought that was fantastic. Yeah, that was one of the last, if not the last time I saw you.
Yeah. Do you know that very day, the day of that premiere, is when I found the lump in my underarm?
Really?
That same day, like maybe hours before I saw you on that red carpet. And I
Holy
was
shit. Wow. So you saw that. Did you at that point, did you already have assumptions on what it was, or was it just
I was really sick. I got really sick the day of the premiere, because that's always what
Okay.
happens when you've been, working so hard on something, and then your body's just in adrenaline mode and then finally shuts down.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. So I thought, this is definitely strange. It was like a golf ball sized lump in my underarm. And I thought it was strange, certainly, but figured maybe this weird sickness that I have caused my lymph nodes to swell up. So I wasn't super worried about it, but I thought I'll get a doctor's appointment when I get back to LA in 5 days. And so I did. I went to the doctor right away, because it did not get smaller as my cold went away.
Oh my, because it's that's the thing that everybody does. You feel sick, you feel a lump, you Google it, it tells you you have cancer, and you're just like, oh, I have cancer, and then you see a professional, and then you're like, oh no, I don't. I had a hard lymph node in my neck for about 3 weeks, and this was during the pandemic, and I called the doctor, and he said if it doesn't go away after a month, I was like, a month? I thought it should go after 3 days. He goes, no, a month. If it doesn't go away, call me back, and it did go away. So I had that. I can relate to what you're saying, but your story in this case, it was cancer.
Yeah. And by the way, they told me the exact same thing when I went to the hospital.
Oh shit.
They looked at it, they were like, this is definitely suspicious, but we don't really like biopsying things if we don't have to. You have no history of cancer. It doesn't seem likely that this just came out of nowhere. It's probably a cyst. So why don't you come back in a month if it's still there? And
Wow.
I said, absolutely not. Like, this is really weird. It doesn't feel right. I don't think it's a cyst. Let's biopsy it. And 3 days later, HER2 positive, stage 3 breast cancer.
And that was the beginning of Bob.
That was the beginning of Bob, the
Okay, so
beloved my tumor.
yes, I think that was and you went public and you shared this on social media. Um, and I remember, when you gave your sister name, I was just like, wow, like already you already had decided something in terms of how you're going to approach this with your attitude and perspective. Was that like a day one thing, like the moment? How does it feel when somebody tells you you have cancer?
It was surreal. It came via a phone call, because I had switched insurance that year and I didn't have a primary doctor. And so when you go to an oncologist, they usually have to deliver the news to your primary doctor first.
Okay.
And she had no primary doctor to call. And so she called me and she said, hi, this is Dr. Grumley, and we need you to come in immediately tomorrow for a number of tests. And I said, that doesn't sound good. And she said, well, we usually like to deliver this news in person, but you do have cancer. And I was kind of shell shocked. And I got off the phone and I was in my office in Los Angeles. And I actually just started laughing. It was the weirdest response. It was just like a fit of laughter. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, how does this is not real. This is not real. This is just someone has just created a wrinkle in the universe, and I have fallen into it. And I was kind of in I think denial for the first month. I didn't believe it was real. So you just sort of go through all the motions and say yes to doing all the things, but to be perfectly honest, I don't think the stakes of the situation really hit me until even probably halfway through chemo, because I started chemo right away. And that was kind of, you have this thing implanted in your chest so that you can get the drugs go straight to the heart. And you're super sick, you feel terrible. And even then, it just doesn't, the whole thing just feels so bizarre.
Hmm.
Um, but I don't know that I ever really felt like, I think I always wanted to, my intent in approaching, like naming the cancer and sharing about it with some levity was definitely a way for me to cope with the seriousness of it, and for me to explore alternate ways of relating to it. I mean, I had moments where I was actually really scared, and moments where, I did wonder, what if I end up along the same path as my aunt. My aunt was diagnosed with the same type of cancer I was 15 years ago, 20
Wow.
years ago, passed away. And she was young and she fought it for years. So there were moments where I thought, what if that's destiny too. But for me, humor was the most helpful of all the tools, which was a little bit strange for some of my friends because I was always making cancer jokes and they just like didn't know how to like, do we laugh? Do we not laugh? I'm like, whatever you guys feel like, but this is what makes me laugh. So
Yeah, I mean, even for me, just hearing about it, there was something therapeutic of just being able to say like "fuck Bob," you
yeah,
know,
fuck.
like "fuck Bob" for real, and just being
Get
able
him
to
out of
say that. Um, yeah, it's kind of cancer seems to. I mean, because cancer is cancer, but then people also use the word cancer as like that is a cancer. Like Donald Trump is a cancer. Like that's how bad cancer is. Like everyone
here. Right.
fucking hates cancer, and there's nobody on this earth who hasn't been touched by it in some way, shape, or form. And it seems to be so common, but there's also this underlining of like, is it avoidable? Is it not avoidable? Did you go through a phase of like trying to figure out like, did this
Oh
just
my,
happen? Was this genetic? Did I stand near the microwave for too long? Like, did you did you go through that?
oh my God. I wrote an entire musical song about all of the different things that I probably did to cause my cancer. Like
Oh my God.
as a funny way to cope. I mean, like, do you know how much orange Sunny Delight I drank as a kid? Like, I cannot even begin to tell you how much of that crap I ingested. And then as I moved into adulthood, I graduated to, carbonated Sunkist. And I would drink those every day. So I was like, for sure, that's like somewhat responsible for my cancer. But then you go down a laundry list of things, everything from the mold that you had in your apartment when you were 22 and they didn't have the money to take care of, to genetics, to emotional trauma, to a bad breakup. Like, the list could go on and on and on of all the different ways that our bodies respond to negative inputs. And we just have no idea. It'll drive you berserk trying to figure it out.
So that's interesting. Like, so you use the word negative inputs, and that's such a Taryn thing to say, because the neuroscientist, the technology side of you, I know you view yourself as this, you view humans, as a form of robot, I guess, on some level, in
We're an advanced form of artificial
an
intelligence.
advanced form of artificial intelligence. I would question the advanced side and intelligence side, but I get what you're saying, and I think that's a really it's super interesting because so I learned that the reason we replay back certain traumatic events and certain moments when we fucked up is because that's almost like a survival way of learn. You continually replay it until you can learn everything you can. All the coulda, woulda, shouldas are there to ensure it doesn't happen again. The challenge with that is it also applies in situations that are completely out of your control.
Yeah.
Whether it's like, oh, I had, people get in car accidents. Had I left 5 minutes earlier, it's taking this old, prehistoric tool that kept us from getting eaten by saber-toothed tigers, and now it's applied to like going through the laundry list to figure out why you have cancer, figuring out, you know, why you were on that, why somebody may or may not have been on a certain plane, or whatever, crossing paths with an individual, breakups, whatever. Um, did you get to a point where you started to like, because I'm sure you had raw emotional moments, and then you also had, just, have a great attitude, let's add levity. But then did this also turn into, an experiment for you? Like, did this also turn into something where you were observing yourself experiencing all of this?
Mm, that's a great question. I mean, I'd like to think that I had, some meta awareness through all of this. And there were moments where I was like, whatever I'm going through, as traumatic as this is, in some ways, it's also like I'm getting to experience another edge of life that
Mm,
I have not even come close to experiencing before. And there is something sort of beautiful about this, where I'm actually coming face to face with my own mortality and physically feeling like I was dying as well when I was going through chemotherapy. And I think in those moments, yeah, it was really interesting to watch myself. I found something that was really something that really struck out at me in my own thinking and my relating to the cancer was that when I was at my sickest from chemo, usually like day 7 to 10 after my infusion, I would just be bowled over in a bed in like my room, just in a ball, sobbing. The only thing that brought me some relief was sitting in a bathtub because right, my whole body just felt like it was decaying from the inside out. It was
Because
just very
chemo is pretty much trying to kill the cancer while also just kind of killing everything else about you as well.
That's right. So
Yeah.
cancer cells replicate much faster than ordinary cells. They're like normal cells that have gone haywire, and the body can't recognize it as a foreign agent, and so they just proliferate, and they proliferate very quickly. And so most chemotherapy agents target fast-growing cells, and they kill them. And unfortunately, there are other fast-growing cells in the body, like hair, nails. That's why everyone loses their hair on chemo. Your stomach, all of your stomach lining is constantly regenerating. So your whole stomach is just being attacked. That's why you have the vomiting and all kinds of other not so fun stomach issues. And yeah, and there's other cells in the body too. Your nerves, like in your like all along your entire skeletal system. So a lot of chemotherapy patients, and myself included, had crazy nerve pain, almost felt like fireworks shooting everywhere in the body. That was one of the more uncomfortable aspects. And then bone pain because it's killing the bone cells. And yeah, so there is a lot of discomfort. And in those moments, I found it almost impossible, Humble, to like maintain a positive attitude. Like it was just, I was in so much pain that seemed to override any ability I had to like maintain a positive disposition about what was going on. And then you cut to like a week later when you're starting to come out of it and you're feeling a little bit better. And all of a sudden I've had the resources again to meditate, to, to find a different perspective and get excited about life again. But it was amazing just like watching myself go from positive and laughing and kind of just navigating my way through it the best I could to these moments of utter despair where I just want to die, where I actually like I didn't want to live because I was in so much pain. And the fact that you go through that cycle over and over and over again, it just really gave me a lot of compassion for people who are in chronic pain or have like really severe depression, and wanting to tell them like this can pass. It doesn't always, but it can pass. And so to just like have that hope when you are in those really dark moments, that if you can just make it to the next day and then one more day, a lot of times things shift and evolve.
Yeah, I feel like I want to take this two different ways. Like, so there's one thing that you said that I thought was interesting. Like, you talked about, because I know, like, I've had some back issues, and at its worst, I got super existential, and then at my best, I'm like, oh, it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me, because it all happened at the same time. I had highlights in my career, and it really, I remember at that point when I had a herniated disc. It was the same week that the biggest check I had ever made came in the mail, and I had to, and it was the check so big I had to go to the bank to deposit it. And I remember taking a cane. I had to like walk with a cane, and it was a really good perspective thing for me, being like, what the fuck does any of this matter if you're gonna have to walk with a cane? And I get existential, if I start feeling pain. And the thing with that is there's still a little bit of a straight line, which is like, okay, stretch more, be more active, be more mobile. I don't know. There might be, I don't know, stem cells, something. There's a list of options I can explore. And you're not, you're not the first, person who's thrived in the face of cancer that I've met. And it always feels like the attitudes that people possess are so much stronger. Did you notice that with yourself, or was it really like, okay, this is who Taryn always was? Cancer kind of got me down, kicked me in the ribs, but then I got back up and I was the same. Did you feel like that it brought out more in you? Because you're right, this isn't simply just have a good attitude. This is real. This is some real shit. Like, this could be the end for real.
Yeah. Yeah. And having to come to terms with that is really hard. I mean, I did. There was a moment halfway through my chemo where so when you're diagnosed, they kind of you literally get a cancer 101 booklet. It's like, here's all the information you need to know, and you're so overwhelmed because there is so much information. And the doctors try to take it one step at a time. So I always, when the pandemic hit, I actually felt like, whoa, this is strangely similar to my experience with cancer, because there's so much uncertainty. You have no idea if your body's going to respond to treatment. So as a result of that, you have no idea how long your treatment is going to last. And while you're in treatment, you can't do things. Like you're sort of in quarantine in a way. Like you get sick easily, you can't properly work, you never know how you're going to feel day to day. And so there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty there. And halfway through my chemo, one of my doctors revealed to me that if I didn't respond to this chemo drug, I would have to continue on another new drug for a period of 12 months after I was finished. And I said, well, what's the statistical chance that I will have to continue on this new drug? Because I'm going to respond to the drug I'm on, right? And she's like, well, technically you have a 45%, you have a 55% chance of continuing on this new drug. And I had no idea that this was like a very real potential future for me, that I would be on this really hard chemotherapy drug for another year. And I lost it. I just totally lost it. I was like, I can't do that. I don't have it in me. But the reality is, when you're faced with these situations, you always have it in you. Like you just keep going. And I do think, and to answer your question, like coming out of that, I did feel so much stronger. I was like, wow, I made it through the toughest thing I've ever gone through in my entire life. My whole entire life changed as a result of that. And I was forced to sit with uncertainty and with a lot of uncomfortable things that I hadn't sat with before. And realizing that I still made it through was such an achievement. It changed like my orientation with pretty much everything in my life, love, career, all of it, all of it.
Um, and feel free to stop me if I cross any lines with this question, and I'll try to word it the best I can. So I was talking to one of our mutual friends, Leslie. Um,
Les-
it's not Leslie, sorry. The chef, sorry. I'm just
oh
saying.
yeah, of
Yeah, Leslie.
course. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I think I was saying something along the lines of, like, Taryn's, it's, you know, I, I worry. Obviously, I was thinking about Taryn, and I was worried about Taryn. Um, but I felt a little bit of assurance knowing that she had a support system that I thought I was aware of at that time. And that support system, as people, but as resources and everything. And then she kind of brought to my attention that support system wasn't there. Um, Again, if this isn't something you want to speak about, this all can get cut out. Um, but if you could speak on, because I guess in terms of, it's kind of a kicking you while you're down type situation, again, without going into details and stuff like that, was that an impact, or were you already at, like, okay, I'm already dealing with as much as I need to deal with, it doesn't really matter at this point?
It's a really good question. I mean, it was incredibly hard to lose a partner while going through that. It was definitely adding uncertainty on top of uncertainty. And if I could go back and shift the timing of that, would I? Yeah. It's hard for me to see. Even to this day, it's hard for me to see a lot of virtue in kind of experiencing all these things at once. And yet, at the same time, it's quite possible that the truth of the situation is exactly what you pointed out in the second kind of uh, way of looking at it, which is that I was going through so much that it's possible it adding that onto the plate of things to deal with maybe made me better able to cope. There was also a moment in my journey last fall, and at this point, my partner and I were separating, and I actually prayed, and I said, "Please, God." So I'm a pretty open agnostic.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I I'm very left brain science oriented. I still love to explore spirituality and all of the various elements of that. But I suppose like my brain relates to it as science that just we don't have the tools for yet.
Yeah.
But I prayed and I said, if I can just get a complete response to chemo when I go through surgery, if I come out of surgery and they say the chemo killed all of it, I promise you, I will find joy. I will find joy, because in those moments I was really struggling to see how life could be joyful. I was really in a lot of pain, emotional and physical pain, and then I got the good news. It was a week later. I got the good news that I was cleared, that they found no remaining tumor cells. So that 55% chance of having to be on that new chemo drug was now a 0% chance. I was going to be done with the hard drugs I was done with. And I thought, oh my gosh, you know what? As much as I value love and partnership, and it truly is like the one thing that I always wanted in life. I'm here. I'm here, and I will rise again, and it will all be okay, and I will find another partner. So I think that in a weird way, things happening when they did kind of gave me a lot of strength to just be grateful for being alive. And I actually, strangely, I had a friend, a girl who I had crossed paths with a few times in my 20s professionally, who was diagnosed at the same time I was. She lives in LA. She was also a TV host, so we did a lot of that when we were sort of making our way through the entertainment industry. And she reached out to me after I posted on Instagram. She was very quiet. She didn't tell anyone about her diagnosis except for a few friends. And I believe we were the same stage initially when we were diagnosed. She had a slightly different type of breast cancer than I did, but similar. We both had multiple tumors in our lymph nodes, and we both like met with the same doctors, and we really helped each other through treatment, mostly over text message, but she was kind of like my sister in all of that. And we planned to celebrate when we finished treatment by going to Joshua Tree and like having this big epic celebration. And she passed away in August and of this year. So exactly 1 year and 2 months after we were both diagnosed.
Wow.
And that was incredibly hard for me. Like hearing that news, I mean, just devastated that she didn't make it. I never doubted that she would. And she was so positive and had such an amazing mindset, and devastated for her husband and her newborn child that she had just had before her diagnosis. And like that was another reminder. There was a moment this year I was like kind of back in a bit of a grief stage, kind of like mourning everything that I felt I'd lost. It wasn't just the cancer. It was like my whole life. I basically was living a completely different life. 12 months after this diagnosis, it changed everything. And I was kind of in this like yucky space of loss. And I think I was also just feeling lonely from COVID and feeling just kind of like, this sucks. Like, man, it's really hard for me to find this silver lining in everything right now.
Yeah.
And then when she passed, I was like, no, like screw all of my issues. I am still here. And I need to wake up every morning and just like be so grateful that I get to be here and I get to play this crazy game called life where I get to suffer, where I get to feel heartbreak, where I get to feel all of these things and overcome them. She doesn't get that opportunity.
Wow. I mean, does it last? The gratitude, again, the animal that we are, or the advanced artificial intelligent, robot that we are, I know there's a scientific term for like getting used to your circumstances. Like I'm sure after a month or two in your paradise, you might not notice the paradise because our brains are designed to notice everything that's out of place, not the stuff that's supposed to be there, and not just sights, smells, sounds, circumstances, everything. So we're always, focusing on what's out of place. And the antidote to a lot of our suffering and a lot of our issues is gratitude. Now, to face what you faced and to experience all that shit that you experienced, the gratitude comes, and I do believe it's a choice, and I think it's amazing that you made that choice, where many do kind of fall into a world of self-pity. But does it last? Like, can you just say like, I'm gonna be, the level of energy and gratitude that came the day I realized I'm off the medication, I'm off the treatment, is that going to last? Is it lasting, or do you catch yourself getting caught back up into first world issues and all that stuff?
It gets harder. It's like the thing that starts to slip between your fingers. And
Yeah.
I one of my mother's close friends had breast cancer many years ago, and she wrote me a note when I finished radiation, and it said, try to hold on to the, I don't remember exactly what she said now, but it was like, try to hold on to the preciousness of life that you've been able to, the preciousness of this situation, of these moments, and try to remember, because that really is what's going to get you through the tough moments where you wonder, why me, and why did this have to come in and sort of up uproot my whole life. And yet, even with distance, right, like even with distance from things, I start to see the virtue in everything that happened, and like the positives that have come out of it. But yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I think I spent the first 4 months out of treatment, or like basically while I was going through radiation, and all the way up until about March of this year, April of this year, I felt just this intense gratitude. And then I noticed that April, May, June, and I'm sure it was probably intensified by COVID and not having like the kind of socialization that I needed for my mental well-being. But I started feeling it slip through my fingers. And by August, I was in a tough spot again, trying to make sense of what had just happened. And it wasn't until Tatiana passed away that I was able to, like, it overwhelmed me, the feelings again of how lucky I am. And so since then, I have been able to hold on to that. Not that I don't have my moments, but yeah, I do feel that intense gratitude.
Are there any like active strategies that you're using right now to kind of hold on to that, or to hold yourself together, or just, even, as again, time goes on, and, and hoping that there are no more episodes, just that, this is all left in the past. Um, have there been changes to like your daily routines in terms of just getting your mind right?
The strategies change a bit depending on kind of what I'm feeling or going through, but I'm always journaling. I've got a journal. It's my favorite. It just always makes me laugh when I see the cover of it. It says, "Humble the poet gave you this journal, and now you're thinking about his beard." So like, I always think about you now when I'm journaling. But it's interesting. This one, I have different journals for different things.
Yeah.
And this one I actually started at the beginning of 2020, and I had like my 2020 intentions, and then I would map out each morning, like an intention for the day,
Okay.
and like a gratitude mantra. So like, here's one. I have Monday, January 6th. This was last year. My intention was to feel the magic of the universe. And then I look at my calendar and I find at least one moment, a point of connection, a meeting, a dinner, whatever's happening, where I can try to feel the magic of the universe in that moment, like cultivate that. And yeah, I I used that. I have another one. Here's Wednesday. My intention was to express gratitude to everyone who has helped me. And so I had like a note here to make sure that I expressed gratitude to all of my radiation nurses that day because I had to go to the hospital.
Wow.
So I just like find these little moments to try to be intentional about how I can actually incorporate these ideas and thoughts into my day. But I love doing like 5 to 10 minute gratitude journaling where I just say, here are the 3 things I'm grateful for, the 3 things I'm excited about for today, and like something I'm calling in. And I feel like it just really gets my head in the right space and thrusts a certain lens on the day. So I
I
would say
feel like sometimes
simple.
when I do that, I get stuck on autopilot with that. Do you find that where I'm literally writing things I'm grateful for just because I'm writing them, and I'm not even feeling gratitude as I write them?
And that's when you know you have to, I think, I'm no expert, but I think that's when you have to move on to a different practice,
Yeah.
right? It's like things, it's so true. Like things sometimes feel very authentic and they move us. And then other times they just feel like you're dialing it in and it's not actually bringing you something that's meaningful. And so um, I change my strategies. Uh, Sometimes I have this one song that I found on Insight Timer. It's like a meditation app. It's a 10-minute song and it's just beautiful. It makes me feel like my heart's opening up every time I listen to it. And I
Mm.
some mornings I just wake up and I just listen to the song and I allow myself to daydream, like visualize myself a year from now or 2 years from now in my perfect day. And I just do that to that soundtrack. And that makes me feel that feeling of gratitude. So I guess I try to search for different things that feel authentic in the moment and they do change.
I think that's actually that idea of like, picturing a beautiful day in the future. That's something I literally like this morning was kind of marinating on. It's, I had an issue, or I still have an issue where, um, as we all do, anxiety is stressing yourself out over the future, right? And then you start to assume a bad situation and you start to live it as if it's happened, you know. And that anxiety could be missing the bus. That anxiety could be having to take new medication for your cancer. That anxiety could be failing an exam. It could be anything. And then, but at the end of the day, it was we're living that future today, and it's generally negative. And it never occurred to me that you could do the exact opposite. Like you could live a future of what's it going to feel like when this shit is over? Whether it's the pandemic, whether it's your treatment, whether it's, acing a test or a quiz. I'm just trying to think what the listeners are stressed out over, whether it's having that awkward conversation with that family member or that person you care about. And it's like, there's something to be said about that, because it's the truth is, if you the way you feel is like you're a magnet. So if you feel like shit, you're gonna attract shit. And if you feel wonderful, you attract wonderful. And the way to make you feel wonderful is to think about wonderful things. It's not rocket science in all of this.
Yeah,
um
100%. Channeling. We're all just like channeling a different energy or frequency.
s-
Do
s-
you use this as a tool?
so I'm on step one, which is catching myself worrying
Mm,
about the future. So that's where I'm at right now. And I made a promise. That's one of my New Year's intentions, which is, um, you will not, you're not holding space for this stuff. It's, um, I used to justify it as, hoping for the best, preparing for the worst. So I was like, oh, I have to prepare for the worst. So I have to live the worst and I have to prepare for it. And in certain situations that I'm dealing with in my life, I've done it. I've prepared the worst. I've hired the people who I need to hire. I've done the stuff I need to do. Like I've sorted it out the way it needs to get done, and it might just be a waiting game now. So now revisiting it is not of any value anymore.
mm,
Very similar to you. Like, you've consulted with the physicians. You're getting the treatment. Now it's going to take a couple of months, and you gotta go through the motions. And uh, so that's where I'm at. And I've realized triggers. Like I've realized that, like, legitimately the inside of my shower is a trigger to think about certain worries, and that's where I find my mind thinking about the same things. Yeah.
I was saying that's really powerful that you're noticing the triggers.
Yeah, I'm trying to pay attention to it. So that's where I'm at. I'm not at the positive stuff yet. But it is interesting because because there is some that does bring up a question I wanted to ask. So I'm assuming, during this, when you got, the diagnosis, while you're going through chemo, everything, you had to have been imagining what it would feel like to get the news that you don't have to go through this anymore. Or, you know, for many people, and I think you did as well, to ring the bell.
Yeah. Well, so it's interesting. I'm also I feel like I'm such a paradox because I can do the positive visualization and I'm also a diehard stoic.
Yeah.
So, the practice of stoicism often is I can't remember the term for it now. It's a Greek term, but it's actually playing out the worst case scenario in
Mm-hmm.
your mind and doing that repeatedly enough to where you actually get comfortable with it and you learn to accept it,
Mm-hmm.
and so that you can like sort of move past the fear and ultimately realize that usually worst case scenario isn't as bad as you think.
Yeah.
Now, granted, when you're diagnosed with cancer, you're like, worst case scenario could be pretty bad. But even then you get to a point where you're like, all right, I could die. It's a little sad because I'm kind of young, but I've lived a great life. And, you sort of get to a place of acceptance with it. So I think I teetered back and forth between the positive visualization of seeing myself survive, seeing myself thrive, and and also sort of accepting the worst case and feeling prepared for that so that it wouldn't gut me if I found out that I was going to be back in another cycle of hard treatment. Um, and I don't know the answer to which one is the better strategy. A lot of healers would say, oh, don't waste any energy on the negative, on anything that's like remotely negative and you're letting that negativity in. But I found value in the stoic practice too,
Mm-hmm.
of just saying, you know what, sometimes bad things happen and we have to accept them. And and playing that out in my own mind made it actually feel less overwhelming,
Yeah.
uh, more containable.
It's like, I think a lot of us, the big issue with us and problems is we spend so much time kind of arguing the fact that it shouldn't be a problem. Like, this shouldn't be happening. This shouldn't be happening. And it's like taking that stoic approach. It's, I accept that this is happening, and now I'm going to go through the motions of playing it out. And also, this is the opportunity to see what I actually have within my control to deal with it, to address it, and either make peace for it, or prepare for it, do what you have to do. I'm sure you did the hoping for the best and preparing for the worst, and I'm sure preparing for the worst, I'm sure, involved some awkward conversations, some administrative stuff, logistical stuff. Just, you have to
Yeah.
do it, whereas some people are just like, this shouldn't be happening, so I'm not even, like, nothing's gonna get done.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. There's nothing like signing your will
Mm.
for the hospital to like really sit with stoicism at its best or worst.
So on the flip side of this, there was a part of you that imagined you ringing the bell,
Yeah.
um, and you're an individual outside of this. You have quite a resume. As you've lived a non-common life. You've had experiences, been places, met people, done things that the average human being, even in the first world, doesn't get an opportunity to do. And we rank these things. Sometimes you sit there and you have these moments of like, wow, if 8-year-old me could see me now, and you have these. Um, did ringing the bell live up to what you thought ringing the bell would feel like?
Oh man, I was a mess when I rang that bell. It was like it felt like the culmination of the hardest journey I'd ever been on. Yeah, it was actually beautiful. It was
Yeah,
a completely beautiful experience.
yeah,
You Yeah. I actually don't even have words for it, but it was such a triumphant moment. And by the way, even in that moment, you don't feel like the journey's over. Like you
yeah,
know that it's a symbol that you've sort of crossed a finish line, but you're never really finished. And I mean that theoretically and pragmatically, like, can't you have to I will forever be much more watchful of my health and certain health practices. Like, I don't want this cancer to come back. It could.
Yeah.
It could. I have a higher risk of it coming back than anyone else
Yeah.
that doesn't have cancer.
Yeah.
But that's not the fear that I live with every day. But yeah, I think it was a beautiful experience.
That's beautiful. Um, and in the intro, I'll explain who you are so everybody has context as to the work you do, and traveling around the world to find people with computers in their brains and how that's going to help them on a human side. Um, how has this experience and all the experiences around it, how is that impacting your storytelling?
I mean, I think it reaffirmed a lot of my passion for educating and entertaining people around the world of technology. I mean, it was technology that killed my cancer and saved my life. I mean, even specifically with the type of cancer I had, HER2 positive cancer, if I was diagnosed with that 15 years ago, it was basically a death sentence.
Wow.
They just didn't have good targeted drugs for it. And now they do. And so the stats are quite good. Um, but yeah, I think that I have a responsibility as a storyteller and someone who's innately curious about science and technology to bridge the gap between these breakthrough ideas and the broader public, and making sure that people have an understanding of what's coming. And I do have a more tech optimistic approach. I do feel like greater abundance on an individual and a collective level is possible because of some of these things that are on their way out. Not to say that there aren't really important questions and kind of ethical concerns that we need to address along the way, 100%. But we just have we have so much negative storytelling about the future. I think people, as you pointed out earlier in the conversation at one point, like, it's just so easy for us to worry. And if we look collectively at the future, it's really easy. We're in a pandemic right now. There's a lot of crazy shit that's happened this year. It's hard not to look forward and feel concerned about the future of humanity. And yet we also need to have these voices that can sort of project a vision for what could be, and root that vision in what is happening right now in science and technology and all these other areas where we are making huge advancements, and these are the areas that will hopefully help us claw our way out of our biggest problems. And I'm sure they'll create a couple or more problems as well, but I like taking the I like taking the approach of, I'm here to paint a picture for people that is more positive and gives hope and possibility, in a way that it's hard to access right now.
So, your film had to do with adding technology to people to bring them to, I guess, what we would define as normal, or or at least to operational. And obviously, at some point, it'll enhance. We could take somebody who's perfectly healthy and then apply technology to them. Whether it's me wearing an Aura ring, me wearing an Apple Watch, me, NBA players having chips in their jerseys to track their fatigue or stuff like that. What about this future is exciting for you, that you want people to know, where it's not simply just becoming this cold hard cyborg, Terminator sequel?
Yeah. I mean, I guess there'd be a couple of things. Since you brought up Aura Ring, I'll bring that up as an example. I have been wearing mine for 3.5 years, and just am obsessed with it. It just completely changed my life, and it gave me this level of meta awareness around how my sleep impacts my cognition. And now I wake up, I can actually, with relative accuracy, predict how much REM sleep I got and how much deep sleep I got based on how I feel. There's like a difference between feeling, physically tired, or this kind of like brain fog tired, and a feeling of like emotionally exhausted And I can basically correlate that now with my sleep. And as a result of that, I can make these changes and optimize in ways that just make me feel like a much better version of myself. And that's just this is a really simple tracking device that we didn't have 10 years ago
Yeah.
access. And it has truly changed my life.
I,
And so
yeah,
as
I,
I,
sorry,
Mhm.
continue.
Oh no, it's okay. Do you
Oh,
have one?
I do. So I was just gonna say, I didn't know about Aura until I went to a party and I met the CEO, Harpreet. Um,
Great.
yeah, he's a great guy. And then I remember, he gave me a ring. And then I think after the first month, I was just kind of calling him. I'm like, this is like having a nagging mom. I just feel like I get shamed every day for my irresponsible sleeping habits. And it's completely valuable, but I wasn't sleeping as much as I should have back then, and it was reminding me that I wasn't sleeping. And all my other friends who had them, we would be sending each other our screenshots of how many steps we took and how much sleep we weren't getting. And since it wasn't instantly making us improve our behavior, it really just kind of felt like I'm getting a notification on my phone to remind me that I suck.
Right. And by the way, if that, like, some of these things do just feel sort of like they can shame you, but
uh,
I did get to a point. It was maybe a year into wearing the Oura ring where I was like, what happens if I actually prioritize sleep? And let's see what happens when I improve my scores. And I was blown away. Like,
mm,
part of the reason I feel I've been a stronger person in the past year and a half while navigating everything that I was navigating through, and like able to have the emotional fortitude for some of the more challenging moments, was directly related to the fact that I was putting sleep as my number one priority and figured out the things that work best. I mean, like, I have to wear earplugs, otherwise I will probably wake up a few times a night from little sounds because I'm very sound sensitive.
mm,
I wouldn't have known that until I got my Oura ring and I was
mm,
seeing that I was actually waking up. And I was like, I don't remember waking up those many times, but it's pulling me out of deep sleep, that deep restorative sleep. So it's like earplugs. I have to make sure that I'm in a pretty cold room.
mm.
Um, Eye shades so that there's no light coming in, so I don't have that kind of waking up in the early morning unnecessarily. All of these things, and I feel like such a better version of myself. I'm amazed that I used to get by on such little sleep. So I've created a new normal, I suppose. But I think, like, in the way that Aura Ring has helped me be a better version of myself, and it's taken some time to establish these new routines and behaviors. I'm excited about all these other technologies that are coming onto the scene, whether it's a brain interface or a urine test that allows you to see all the micronutrients in your blood so that you can actually be constantly tracking your diet and like when you have a deficiency, to, I guess, I mean, I'm trying to think off the top of my head of technologies, stem cell technologies for repair. I mean, there's just so much coming downstream or that's already here that will make our lives so much better. And that to me is just thrilling. Like, life as a human is hard.
Mm.
It's always going to be hard. We're always going to be thrown all these things. And if there are these tools that just make it 10, 15, 20% easier to be human and to navigate those hard times, I will take them.
And you're absolutely correct. Like I either suffered food poisoning or acid reflux or something recently where I just had to stop having all the food that I love, and I just had to like eat bagels and drink water until it like went away. And that included caffeine, and so I would have, caffeine was on the, I was aware that caffeine is an addiction and it's the most abused drug in the world. And, you know, I didn't have the discipline to end it. I had narratives in my head like, nah, like, you're writing a book. You got to like caffeine up and do it. Like this wakes you up. This gets your day started. So by default, I had to stop caffeine just because it would result in like ultimate pain if I consumed any. And then, yeah, I started, I got interested in paying attention to my sleep score because of that. And I'm like, oh, wow, like I'm falling, and I'm falling asleep earlier. I'm waking up earlier. I'm feeling more refreshed. it's been a couple of days. I'm not feeling as foggy. I don't have like withdrawal headaches or anything like that. But I think it's this idea of kind of marrying, for anybody on a journey of improvement, self-improvement, and improving the way they feel, self-awareness is so essential. So, going back to me recognizing that my shower is a trigger for anxiety, and because, what am I thinking about when I'm there? It's also like, okay, well, be aware what impacts your sleep, as you talk about. Now, you need earplugs. Everybody on their phone now has that screen time, that tells you how much screen time you have. And I think, in the beginning, it feels like it's shaming you too. It's like, oh, you spent 3 hours on Instagram today. You did this. But it creates this level of awareness where you're like, okay, I can now measure these things and I can decide if I want things to be better, and I can make incremental improvements. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to be a big gesture. I'm going to quit everything and then, you're going to crash and burn. And you'd be like, all right, let me reduce these things. And I think that's a really interesting thing, especially as you talked about, they're talking about smart toilets, and that can predict if you're going to get sick before you get sick or something like that. And all of these different tools. And there's always going to be a consumeristic side to it, but I feel like even from a consumeristic side, like it'll only work if it adds enough value to enough people.
Right. Right. And if it doesn't, then they won't adopt it.
Did you discover, or were you researching? And I have to believe that you were. When dealing with the cancer, any new technologies, services, drugs, or anything to kind of hack this?
Yeah, I mean, definitely a lot in the world of health. I was already pretty into this stuff anyway, so it's kind of ironic that the biohacker got cancer.
Yeah.
I was I had already frozen my stem cells. I had frozen my eggs. I had done like intravenous stem cell treatments, which, by the way, you don't really want to do if you do have cancer. Um,
Mm.
NAD, like all of these kind of more cutting edge supplementation things. And then when I got into understanding cancer cells and how they work, I sort of took a different approach to my research. So a lot of the things I was doing before actually you can't do once you've been diagnosed with cancer. Um, but things like hyperbaric oxygen treatment, um, that's really, really interesting to me. Like flooding the body with oxygen in a pressurized environment has shown to be really helpful for a number of things like muscle repair, mood disorders, but also even like lengthening telomeres, and which are the caps on the end of our chromosomes and sort of determine on some level they help determine longevity. And that's a relatively simple treatment.
Mm.
Um, Other things that I stumbled upon, high dose vitamin C infusions, which the science the jury's still out, but the preliminary science is good that they kill cancer cells at very high quantities of vitamin C without killing healthy cells. Um, and if you go to a IV place, they usually they'll have vitamin C infusions, not at the level that I was getting, but I think some of that stuff is really interesting. Um, what else? Gosh, I feel like there were a number of different things that I stumbled upon. I mean, I do a lot of testing now, so I'm really excited about this company called Vessel they just launched this year, and I sort of mentioned offhand their technology earlier, but they have these really beautiful urine test cards that kind of look like computer chips, and there's an assay of about 12 micronutrients on there, everything from cortisol to vitamin D, vitamin B12, your ketones. And you can pee on this urine strip, and it's like $7 for a test card. And you can get these micronutrient levels and see where you're at. And like before this came out, I would have to go to my doctor and get a blood draw and spend
Mm.
several $100s for this information. And granted, they only have 12 micronutrients. I think they're expanding, but I'm just so excited about things like that are affordable and scalable and allow us to catch things before they get out of hand in our body. Um, to me, like that's the critical piece, is being able to easily measure what's going on inside of ourselves. Because
Yeah.
sometimes I don't know if you might have like a week where you just feel terrible about everything. I mean, I know this as a woman, if my period's coming, I'm gonna feel like the world is like falling apart, and I will find justifications for that lens.
Yeah.
And it's just hormones. It's literally just hormones. So, the same is true for things happening inside our body, whether it's hormonal or like a deficiency in magnesium that's making it harder for someone to fall asleep at night, and they have no idea. And
Mm.
it's like, oh, they just take magnesium for a week, and then all of a sudden, their life is like significantly improved.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's the thing, is like how far we've come. I know, like, uh, within the Punjabi community, like 10 years ago, I went to a mental health a workshop, and and 10 years ago, everywhere the word mental health wasn't as prevalent as it is now. And I remember they talked about this idea, like, if somebody was dealing with mental health, 100 years ago in the village, like they would assume that they were possessed,
Yeah.
and that mindset's no different now for people who are assuming they're depressed. And sometimes it could be their iron levels, it could be, um you know as you said, magnesium. It could be, it could, and it's going back to, us talking about sleep. What was it? Brené Brown said sleep is self-respect.
Mm.
And
Mm.
thinking about, like, how how much the quality of our life would improve if we just slept more, and how that impacts the chain reaction of everything. And I was having a conversation with a friend recently, when he found out about me not being on caffeine. He was like, "Oh, you're so strong, good for you." I was like, "No, man, again, this is not a discipline thing. I'm literally avoiding getting punched in the stomach by not drinking this coffee." And he's like, "I can't do it." And he was giving all these reasons why. And I said, it doesn't, and he's self-employed. So it's not like he had and right now during the pandemic, even if somebody has a 9 to 5 job, they ain't going anywhere. Um, and through conversations and through just people being open and vulnerable, we figured out that his issue wasn't even going to sleep. His issue was he felt that he needed to wake up early in the morning because he's been conditioned to believe that all high achievers have to be up early in the morning,
Mm.
at the expense of him having to take something to go to sleep at night.
Wow.
And it's like, well, what if we, instead of you taking something to go to sleep at night, you recognize, going back to technology, the blue light in your computer screen or in your television or in your phone, and how that impacts your sleep, or that 5 p.m. Starbucks trip you take, how that impacts your sleep, you know.
Right.
And now, because you took that and that's keeping you awake, now you're taking something else to put you to sleep, and now you're waking up groggy, but you have this old, outdated belief that all high achievers are up at 6:30 in the morning, to
Yeah.
make things happen. And it's like, you start to realize how everything starts to connect, and it could be just that little element of self-awareness, whether it's measuring your sleep, measuring your magnesium. And I think that's really a really important thing for people to kind of take some ownership over, is finding these tools to better figure themselves out, even if it isn't the high level stuff that's on the cutting edge of it. This stuff is still trickling down to everybody eventually.
100%. 100%. And kind of building on what you were just saying, also constantly looking at the assumption stack that we're building about our lives, like the underlying beliefs, the belief that you uncovered in your friend that he had, that like he has to be up early. It's like, whoa, you just question that belief and suddenly everything gets to change
Yeah.
in a better way, right? And
And
that's like the fundamental thing underneath all of this, is like, what are the assumptions that we're coming to the table with about how we should be living our life and how we're moving about the world.
you're absolutely correct. And those assumptions play a part into whether we're reacting or responding to when shit hits the fan in our life. Where it's, 2020 was the year that shit hit the fan for everybody on some level, where they're like, oh, what I thought life was supposed to be is not. And I feel like, now that everyone adapted. And I always equate it to, like, when I take the ice baths, it's like the first 2 minutes, your body's like, what the fuck, get me out of here, why are we here, we're gonna die, get out, get out. And I got to train in Poland with Wim Hof, and
I
his
saw that.
only,
So cool.
oh my God, it was amazing. And it was just so interesting because he's like, all right, it was like 10 in the morning, he goes, all right, 2 p.m. we're gonna get in the ice. And we're like, all right, so you're gonna train us beforehand? He's like, trust your body, we're done training. And like, and that was it. And then he just walked out of the room, and there's like 10 of us standing in the, and it was a wonderful experience to melt away the alpha male in the room, because everyone was kind of like, everybody was scared because nobody had ever done it. And people like, what about like our extremities? Like, don't they say like if you're like one of our fingers fall off? Like, we're taking a scientific approach to it. We're doing all of this stuff, but you go in, and whether you trust your body or not, whether you do the breathing or not, after about 2 minutes, your body figures it out. Your body's like, we're survivors. We know what to do. We're gonna make this happen. And it's kind of like 2020. Not everybody had to make any major adaptations or adjustments. If they didn't want to, they got used to it and figured it out. And some people got too used to it, and they're getting a little too relaxed during this peaks that we're going through right now. But I think it's a really interesting concept of like, if we do this work and we make ourselves uncomfortable and we put ourselves through these uncertain situations voluntarily, and
Mhm.
become more aware of ourselves voluntarily beforehand, then when life, we're better equipped for these curveballs that life is definitely going to throw us.
100%.
I want to thank you so much for sharing, your shit, because I mean, again, I think for everybody listening, including myself, it's such a perspective changer. And there's one thing to, we all tell ourselves, oh, there are people who are worse off, there are people who are going through much. We say it, but we don't mean it. But I think there's something to be said about hearing somebody's story and hearing the journey of their emotions, their feelings, the highs and the lows, and as well as just like the tools that they had beforehand and tools that they picked up on the way. Because I think, everything that you did to deal with a life or death situation can help somebody in a situation that may not be life or death. And I really appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. And I love everything that you've been doing these past, gosh, how long has it been since you wrote your first book now?
The first book was written in 2014, so we've been at 6 years.
Oh, wow, crazy. What a
Yeah.
journey. You're such a talented writer and everything that you share is so fun. It's like a fun read and so insightful. And I've just been routinely impressed. And I have gone to your books when I have needed an upper. So
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate hearing that. It's just, I mean, to witness your journey, I just feel grateful. And I mean, to know that you're using the journal and stuff like that, I mean, that's super cool. But like, I mean, there's a lot for me. Like, I was actively trying to follow your journey and to see where it was going. um, because I think, as I said, I've known people who have gone through it before, but I've never experienced somebody who made such a priority of being public with it, but not, because vulnerability has become currency on social media, and I felt
mhm.
like you did not. And there's people always looking they're expressing self-pity, and they're giving people reasons to feel sorry for them as like a cheap way to get attention. You
Mhm.
had every reason in the world if you wanted to, and you had a story that if you wanted to, you could have done that. But instead, you brought so much comedy and energy and life. And even when you weren't feeling good, you were still sharing light and love in that. And I thought that was so astonishing and so inspiring. And it does give so much perspective. And I feel like that was the reason I reached out to you to have this conversation, because I feel like so many people need that reminder. It's not that, oh, it can be worse. It can always be worse for everybody. Even no matter who you are, it can always be worse, and it can always be better. And your attitude, to quote Kanye West, your attitude determines your latitude. And in these situations, we always have control over our attitudes and our efforts.
This is true.
Um,
This
I,
is true.
I want to ask you one last question, and
Of
answer in
course.
any way that you feel good. So everyone always asks the question, like, what would you tell yourself, if you go 5 years in the past? I like going
Mm.
the other way. So if you can jump 5 years into the future, what would you, 2021 Taryn, tell? I guess, oh shit, 2026. I have to do the math in my head for a second. 2026 Taryn, what would you tell her?
Oh, fun. Man, well, let's hope I haven't slid too far back on the gratitude scale at that point. I mean, I think what I would tell her is to hold on to the preciousness of life and to remember that all of the good and the bad and this like incredible breadth of experience that I just had is part of the dynamic, like it is the most dynamic piece of life, and you can't get the incredible feelings of love and joy without also experiencing the converse. And so I hope that Taryn 5 years from now, whatever she's going through, just remembers that it's all it, that it's all good. It's just
Mm.
all good. Like even the really awful stuff, it's just part of life. It's part of this like beautiful, sad and beautiful and full. It's like just like full. It's just full of everything. And if you can hold the love and you can hold the grief and you can hold the pain and the anger and like all the different things, if you can hold it, it actually just makes life so much more vibrant and dynamic and in some ways satisfying.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. That's honest, and I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you. Thank you.